Okay, everybody. Thank you all for coming. My name's Heather Harp, as you all know. And I am delighted to have served you in the capacity as your city councilor, but also as the cheerleader, if you will, of the Local Government Citizens Academy 2020. So, thank you. It really is a delight. I went to school to be an art teacher, and then I moved to Montana and found out that there are not that many art teacher positions in the city, unfortunately. And then I pivoted to become a financial advisor, which is really, I was still teaching, but it was a different age group and a different subject matter. And what I found on council is that I really also still like to teach. But I get to have a whole team, so all the department heads that have come before you, they get to do all the teaching, and I get to do a lot of learning as well. A couple of things I want to just touch on tonight. We had Dave and Christine Larson, as you know, of the Captain John Mullen neighborhood. They have co-authored that particular op-ed piece. If you are interested in co-sponsoring that and adding your name to the list of members of this group who want to be a part of that, please just go ahead and email Christine and I, and we will add you to that list. And yes, we are going to make a couple small edits, including one of which being, instead of our favorite session was MRA, it will be one of our favorite sessions was the MRA. So if that was holding you back from co-sponsoring that, I want you to know that we will be editing that ever so slightly. Secondly, Patricia Hogan. You wanted to come forward and have mentioned something, right? About the Partnership Health Center. And speak into the mic.
Okay, this is for people like me who can't hear. Remember last week, Partnership Health Center offered to give us a tour of the place? Well, I took them up on that, and they said I could invite other people along. So it's going to be on a Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. for about 45 minutes, a Tuesday of our choosing. If anybody else is interested, let me know before we leave tonight, and I'll put your name on the list. Otherwise, I'm going by myself.
And for the record, that is a marvelous tour. So if you have any questions about how that organization operates, to be able to get behind the scenes and be able to talk with the staff that work there, I think would change your perspective tremendously about what they offer in terms of services for our community, for everyone. Did we have any other announcements from within the group? Seeing none. Okay. So, tonight, we're going to wrap up with, the most important part, I guess, is how does this all get financed? You have been to the fire department, you've seen the police in action, you've seen MRA talk about what they do, Parks and Recs, housing and community development, all of it matters. But the hard part, I think, is trying to make the numbers match up to the need. And tonight we have Mayor John Engen, who presents an executive budget to the City Council, and we have Brian Van Lossberg, our Council President. Along behind them is Dale Bickel, who is our Chief Administrative Officer, and Jessica Miller, who works in the Mayor's office as our Citizen Services Manager. They have been working to put this together tonight in a way that I think is going to be very comprehensive. I know you like to ask questions, so let me ask the group. Would you like your questions as we go along or save till the end?
Let's get through the presentation and then questions all night long.
Okay, very good.
I'll be here overnight.
Hopefully not. And the other thing I want to just kind of let you guys be thinking about, let's try and have the budget presentation end by about 8:30. That gives us a half an hour to be able to, I can give you your graduation certificates, as well as we get to do our little noodling feedback, because I think that's something we all would like to do. So kind of keep that in the back of your minds. Meanwhile, there's more pizza, there's cookies, you know where the bathrooms are. Come and go as you need to, but we'll just keep on task. And with that, Jessica, are you kicking us off? Very good. All right.
Did everybody get one of these things? Everybody has one? Okay. So what I've got here is, alrighty. So on this sheet of paper, we've got a few things. I have some links there on how to find your property tax bill and your appraisal notice online. I'll go over what those look like here in part of my presentation. So I'm going to kind of take you through a little bit of what the property tax bill looks like, and show you how that equates to our budget and where we spend our money. And then Dale's going to kind of talk to you about some of our service trends and our priorities and some things like that and what it has looked like over time. Okay, so I'm going to start off here. So every 2 years now, the state of Montana sends out appraisal notices. So they get the market value of your property, and this is all based on state law. So the first step that goes into creating a tax bill for everybody is the actual appraisal notice. They need the market value of your property. And so you will, for those of you who are property owners or who are renters and are watching the trends, you'll see that the trend has been going up as far as the market value of the property. And that's because under state law, as they have to assess it at the rate that it would sell at as of the date that the notices are dated. So this is not a new appraisal year. 2019 was an appraisal year. They sent out the notices in, I believe, June, and then property owners had 30 days to contest anything that they saw in the appraisal notice if they disagreed with the dollar amount. That cycle obviously is closed now. If there is anybody out there who still questions their appraisal value, you would have until June 1st of this year, 2020, in order to request a change for your 2020 tax bill. So just bear that in mind if you do look up your appraisal notice and think that it's higher than it should be. So let's see here. I'm actually going to slide this over here so I can see what I'm doing and still reach the mic. Okay. Okay, so on your appraisal notice, the first thing is, no, that's not going to work. Sorry. Okay, so you'll see right here, they've got the difference between the current, or they've got your current assessed value, so that would be the date that this notice was sent in 2019, and the previous assessed value. So then they calculate the taxable value of it, and that's based on a weird formula that's in state law that we don't need to know which property classification is which, but based on whether the property is commercial, residential, et cetera, they attach a formula to it, and they multiply that times your market value or your assessed value in order to get your taxable value. Now that taxable value that they have on here is going to be what all of the localities here, city, schools, and county are going to use to calculate your actual property taxes. The estimated general taxes that are on the appraisal notice, that's based on what your taxes were the previous year. So for this appraisal notice in 2019, it would have been the 2018 tax bills. They had a certain number of mills that were levied against the property. They multiply that times the taxable value and estimate what the tax is going to be. So for this year, for 2020, the values that were assigned in 2019 are what all the local jurisdictions are going to be going off of. Okay, so then we've got your property tax bill, and I did print one off on that page I handed around, so it's on the back of that page, and for anybody who has their own, you can follow along on that.
Before we leave that, can you tell us
How the assessment happens? So that process is actually a little bit more sophisticated than what I can tell you about, because it is the state that performs those, so it's the Montana Department of Revenue. And they have a lot of things that they do. I think for residentials, They mostly use comparable sales. They have access to the sales data, and they do that. When it gets into commercials and some of the other properties, the multifamily and stuff, they have different techniques that they may use. They may be income-based or things like that. So that process all occurs at the state level and is out of our control. But when you see our sales prices increasing, then that assessed value increases, and then that does affect your property taxes as well.
So that's probably all done in office and work. They're not actually driving around.
I think they actually do drive around. Yeah, they've got satellite offices.
They are, but they certainly do inspections and sampling and those types of techniques.
And they do have satellite offices all over the state.
Years ago when I bought my house, my realtor was like, never send in your sale value to the state because it's just going to raise your taxes. So is that just based on the few people who do send that? Because I never sent that.
You know, the state has, so Montana doesn't, Montana is not a state where that data is public, the sales data, but the appraisers and the Department of Revenue do have access to all that sales data. So they've got a database that they can access, yeah.
So if they can access that database, so I bought my house in November at $295 and my tax bill says my house is worth $338. How do they justify that?
So that is definitely something that you want to go to that second link on that page there, the property appraisal one. So you'll want to go on there and take a look at your property appraisal, look at making a request and a protest for that, and ask them to reassess, because they will have to produce, you'll have to sign a confidentiality agreement, but they will have to produce the comparable sales and things like that. And and they do base it on the sales value. So your own home is the best comparable sale, and so definitely go on before June 1st and get online and start that process to get that evaluated.
Is there something that property owners can do to best prepare themselves so they bring a settlement statement?
You know, on that link they've got a lot of really good information about every step of the process. So yeah, they'll be able to take you through that. Yep. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, so the property tax bill. So what we see here is, I'm actually just going to bring this all up. Okay. So the top part of the property tax bill is, that's all calculated based on the taxable value of the property. So each jurisdiction, you'll see totals for city, county, and schools, both local and state. And each of these is assessed by a mill. We don't really need to understand what a mill is. It's just a rate that is multiplied times your property value, your taxable value, in order to get the tax rate. So here you'll see total for the city, you see county, the way they assess their taxes, it's kind of broken out a little bit more than the cities are. You see all the schools, local schools, state school, and all of this part here in the top, that is all determined by the actual value of your property, that assessed value that we got on those appraised notices. And this total from up here on this part of the bill comes down here to this. So all these jurisdictions combined have a total of, too small for me to read, 900 and some mills that are multiplied times the value, and this total here equals this. This portion down here includes some other special assessments. Some of those are based on property values, so you'll see the city road district and the city park district. Those are also based on the value of your property, like the rates above are, but some of them are flat rates, the things that are down here, as far as you'll see the water quality district, for example, is the same for all residential properties, so those are a flat rate and it's not adjusted based on the value of your bill, or your property, sorry.
This is a public information.
Yes. Yep. So the property taxes are all public, and that is on that first link on the handout that I gave you. And you can go up and look up your property taxes or any property taxes, and that's all there. You can pull up that bill. Also at that link that they've got there, they have some pie charts. We'll be getting into some pie charts here. They have some really detailed pie charts of breakdowns of where your tax money goes. So that's definitely a good resource to take back and take a look at. Okay. So that market value that we talked about in the appraisal notice, they send those appraisal notices out in odd-numbered years, but then that value is also printed at the bottom of your tax bill. And again, those are the numbers that are determined by the State Department of Revenue. So that's how they come up with that. They assigned a value to the land and a value to the home, and then we get our taxable value. And then what happens is we have the number of jurisdictions here. We've got city, county, and schools, and those assess a total of 900 mills. And then that gets multiplied by the taxable value. We divide by 1,000 just to make everything pencil. And then that gives me 3,187, which is the total that you see up here. So you can see how that market value, as that goes up, regardless of what the taxing jurisdictions do, the taxes are going to go up with the market value goes up. In fact, so the city last year, we levied fewer mills than we had the previous year, but most people's city taxes still went up because market values jumped quite a bit.
Lady, did you have a question?
So does that work in reverse as well? So if the economy turns and property values are going down, should homeowners expect to see corresponding decreases in their property taxes?
The property value would decrease. Whether or not the actual taxes would decrease kind of depends on the jurisdictions, because it doesn't get cheaper for us to run our fire stations, for example, when that goes, and so that's when your city council members and the mayor and all your elected officials get to make all the really fun decisions as far as what do we cut back in service or how do we make that happen.
So if there's a big run, so right now Missoula's experiencing pretty substantial appreciation in their property value. So I hope if that was to turn in the next couple of years and properties were going down, people should still expect their taxes to go.
And it's when we get into the speculation like that, Mayor Engen might be able to talk about that a little bit when we get to the question section. Yeah. Right, and that's exactly the reason that the property appraisal system is now on a 2-year cycle instead of, before that it was on a 6-year cycle. And so, and then everything tanked in 2008 and people are still paying property taxes on these things that are not worth what they were before. And then in our first appraisal cycle, over 6 years people had seen a large jump, and so they saw a significant jump in their taxes instead of wherever you do it every other year, and it is a little bit more gradual.
Okay, so really to sum that up, because I'm a new homeowner myself, so basically, okay, yes, definitely your taxes are going to go up. The question is, how much? Okay, right? To arm myself?
To a degree, and I think probably Mayor Engen is the best one to speak to that. This portion of it here kind of shows. This shows how much that market value is a determinant of your property taxes, regardless of what the local jurisdictions do. And then there are additional pressures that, I'll make Mayor Engen answer as far as how those things go. But you've been to the fire station, you've seen the police cars. Our stuff adds up as we start getting more population and stuff.
The website, the taxes website does have past, 6-7 years. So that's a great indicator, I think. And then if you email Tyler, remember his last name? And you could request, what's not on the website to go back even further, and I think you can get a pretty good trend, 15-20-year trend. And a pretty good percent of what you think your taxes are going to go up and project out.
Yeah, and you can also see at that second link on the handout that I sent you, those appraisal notices. You can go in there and find details on your property, and you can see if the details that the state have are the same as you have. If they say it has 5 bedrooms and you only have 3 or something like that, those are things that might, adjust their value. And you can also go back a few years and see what their assessed value has been on the home in previous years as well. Okay, so as far as where your property taxes go, so we looked at our total up here. And we come down here and you'll see the city is just under 30% of your property taxes. The bulk of it goes to schools. So when we combine local and state schools, we've got about 45% of your taxes going to the schools. County is about 20%. And then special districts, which are the things like Mountain Line and the Water Quality District, those compose about 4.5% of your property taxes. So, you know, again, a lot of it is driven by market value. Some of it is driven by what the local jurisdictions are doing, but, you know, 30% of your tax bill comes to the city. All right, so I'm going to step into our budget process just a little bit. I think that Dale will probably speak to this a little bit more as far as setting our priorities, but this is the time of year when City Council and administration start having strategic planning sessions. They kind of talk about what are our goals and you know, where do we need to put our revenue, and those needs kind of help inform and guide our budget process and our budget requests. Usually in around April or May, the mayor presents his executive budget to Missoula City Council. The way it is, the mayor creates the budget and he presents it to City Council, and then City Council discusses it, adds things, removes things, whatever, and then we get, you know, presentations on what all the departments are going to be doing. That happens throughout the summer, and then sometime in August is when the City Council actually finally votes to adopt the budget after having seen all of that. And in August we receive our certified values from the state, and so that's how much we know we're getting in property taxes, and so we wait to adopt the budget until after we know that, because otherwise suddenly they come in a lot lower than we were expecting, and you know, we can't afford the 3 new police officers we wanted and things like that. So that is our timeline, and you'll be seeing that. I've got a couple links on your handout there for signing up to receive any kind of notifications for when meetings come around and when we start making changes in the budget. So anybody who's interested in following that process as it goes through the summer, you can keep an eye on that. Okay, so here's the actual fun budget stuff. This is all city funds, and when I say all city funds, I mean everything from our wastewater treatment to our police to, you know, Parks and Recreation and the Aquatics Fund, which is separate, and our Parking Commission, and all of those things are included in here. You can see even amongst everything we do, our public safety, which is police and fire, is about 22%. Public works, which is going to be our streets and our wastewater and our water, that's about 30%. A lot of these other things are pretty small. There's a category in here called general government, which sort of encompasses everything else we do, which is our IT department supporting our information infrastructure, our finance department getting our vendors paid and getting our employees paid, our human resources department managing all our benefits and doing, you know, all of our hiring and things like that. You know, the mayor's office, city council, all of those things are categorized in that general government category, which is about 9% of our total budget. It also includes city attorney and municipal court. So that's where we spend our money. Yeah, I did skip one. Okay.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. You have social and economic services 0%.
Right. As a percentage of our entire budget, I didn't put the decimals on this one because it was a little bit harder to read on that, and so it's a much smaller percentage than other things. Right. So it's less than 1%, but yeah.
What's the current budget?
Our budget is about all funds, including utilities, about $125 million. There are about 600 FTEs.
Okay, and I somehow managed to page past this one. This is where all our money comes from. So when we're looking at, again, all of the work we do, including wastewater and, you know, parks and everything else, about 31% of our revenue comes from those taxes and assessments, which is your property taxes and your road and park districts. We've got some stuff from licenses, Our intergovernmental revenue is going to be anything that we get, like grants from the federal government. State entitlement share is a portion of state money that they dole out to the cities. And our charges for services are going to be things like, permit fees and things like that. So state entitlement is, and again, Dale could be more detailed on this, but they calculate how much money we get of the state's revenue.
It's our share of state income tax revenue that that the legislature agreed to back in 2001. It's based on original when property tax reform was happening in the legislature, and they created the current caps and changes. They created a mechanism to reimburse local governments for that, so we just wouldn't raise property taxes to account for that loss. And that's been in a law called the entitlement share, and so that's calculated based on the general growth of the state and our population.
Okay, so that was everything we do. What you'll see us talking about a lot is our general fund, and that'll play a heavy role as we come into our budget season. I don't expect everybody to be able to read everything on here. Basically, what I wanted to show you is these are the things that are largely funded by your tax dollars. So you'll see, for example, over here under Public Works, we've got wastewater and water. Those are grayed out because those are not funded by your property taxes. Those are funded by your wastewater bill and your water bill and those sorts of things. So the things that are gray are not the things that we pay for on the property tax bill that you get every year. They're funded in another way. Building permits, for example, are, that's its own department. We've got planning money and aquatics, things like that. So all of the things that are funded with your tax dollars here are green, and again, that's that big general government category with the city council and attorney and all that, as well as our police, our fire, and then we do include our road and park districts in here as well. So that this is a lot of what we're talking about when we start going through the budget process, and this is the portion of the budget that plays the heaviest role in our conversations as we move through the budget season, because this is the part that you see on your tax bill every November when you get it, and it's the part that hits the checkbook of our property owners most directly. So when we look at our revenue and our expenditures for just the general fund, all those things that were on that previous page, so the revenue there, over half of our revenue comes from the property taxes and the assessments that we get. Not very much of it is from licenses and permits. You'll see when we take out some of those other self-funded things like wastewater, the state entitlement ends up being a much larger share. Intergovernmental, again, are going to be any kind of grants that we get. And our charges for services, again, would be things like permit-related or, park rentals and some things like that. So,
About 40 million.
And I have a question too. I saw that the cemetery is, you say, paid for by tax dollars. Is there not fees?
There are also fees for the cemetery, so that's one of those, they have their own fund, but they do receive some tax dollars as well. So it's not everything on this page is 100% tax dollars, but these are the areas that are funded with that.
Question. You said income tax, or not income, saying property tax without income tax.
So again, income tax goes to the state, and that's that state entitlement share that Dale was talking about. So this portion right here is a number that we get from the state based on their formulas that are revenue and population, but it's not something that we have any kind of a role in setting or figuring out. So this portion down here, the taxes and assessments, this is the part of the budget that most directly affects people. We do some things like charges for services and licenses and permits that, the city council also can set those rates, but a lot of it, the rest of it is not really under our control.
Excuse me, if you see state entitlement, intergovernmental, you said that's grants that come. Where does that money come from?
So the grants, primarily they're going to be federal or state government grants. I know that we get some, we've got some home funding. We occasionally get some law enforcement grants. As far as other grants that are in the general fund, I'm not sure if they'll...
They're opportunistic, so it depends on the specific department and their ability to apply and receive a grant. And it's, in 2020, I think a lot of that is probably, well, like triple to our entitlements, like home and CBG. Yeah, going to be the biggest pieces of that is our federal dollars.
And where does that money come from?
So, when it comes from the federal government, it can kind of be a lot of everything. A lot of it will be like income taxes or... Income taxes of all America. Typically, yeah, generally. Yep. Okay, so that's where our money comes from for the general fund, and where we spend it, again, public safety is nearly half of our budget, so that's police and fire. Public works, so that's going to be your road district, and so that's primarily streets, because the rest of the stuff in public works, the wastewater and the water, those are funded with their own fees. They're not part of this calculation in the general fund here. So that 16% for public works is going to be our street construction and maintenance that we pay for out of our road district. And you'll see 9% is culture and recreation, so that's your park district and all the stuff that goes into that, as well as some of the things that are funded by, fees for service within parks. And again, general government is that big category that includes everything else we do, which is finance, attorney, municipal court, mayor's office, city council, all of that. So that general government piece is a little less than 20% of our expenditures. And I think here is where I was going to toss it over to Dale, kind of talking about some of our service trends and what we've seen over time as far as the demand that we see on our budget.
Hello. So I'm going to step back a little bit and talk a little bit about the budgeting process. And you saw that process, the calendar that Jessica laid out. And but I want to talk a little bit about that strategic planning. We've been for the past few years, between the administration and our department heads and city council, we've been getting together to do a strategic plan where we set our priorities, and have a 3 to 5 year planning horizon related to that, and trying to outline our priorities and make sure we're on the same page. And what we're trying to do, and I wanted to relay, is we're trying to get, we're using more and more non-financial indicators to understand where we're going. And this is just a couple of examples here of things that we're tracking. So we have police calls for services, and we need to get much more granular about this. But so we tend to track these over time, and typically they track fairly steady. You see that big increase at the end. Now that isn't because we had a big spike in crime or calls for services. That's we changed the way we measure, so that happened there. But we have this constant increase in calls for service. Fire incident calls, same thing. We're tracking how we're doing that, and it goes to the point earlier about in times when the economy is going good, are we increasing taxes or are we lowering it in times? Well, regardless of the business cycle and the nature of the services we provide, these things are going to increase. As long as our population is increasing. I mean, that is really the biggest driver related to that. So if our population is increasing, we're still, in order to maintain our level of services, depending on what taxable values are doing, that we may have to, just to maintain the level of service, increase our mill levies. A couple more examples: street miles and population. And you see it, in our both of these. Graphs, it's inflationary in nature, really, by our increase in street miles. Those are largely due to annexations, and we don't do a lot of annexations. 2019, you see that spike up. That was a large annexation, one of the largest ones we've done, and that was that area near the airport, that commercial industrial park there in that neighborhood. So we increased our street miles a lot there. So what we did in that annexation is we were able to calculate, well, what's the tax base that's coming in, and what's the level of service provision that we have to maintain in order to do that, and it paid for it, but just barely in order to do that. So that's kind of one of the struggles we have. In population, you can see that population growth. There, we plug along at about 2% a year in average, which doesn't sound like too much, but when you think about it in the context from 2010 to 2019, well, that's another 10,000 people that are in the city limits of Missoula, and so it is. It doesn't feel like a lot. It feels like a lot right now out there. It's going kind of crazy lately. But even so, even that 2% is a significant piece when you think about now we have 1,000 or more people moving to Missoula every year. So those all put service pressures on it.
So can I ask, of that population, what is the population increase in relation to the annexation that's taken place over that 10 years?
I don't have that data off the top of my head, but except for that, what I would say though, except for that last piece in that 2019, annexation has been pretty slow. The city, the mayor and council haven't had these big initiatives to go out and annex large areas, and so they've only been come in related to specific projects that are related to a new development that needs to connect to a utility more than anything else, and so there hasn't been a significant amount of that is not due to annexation. It's mostly in migration.
I'd say fewer than 1,000.
What's that?
I'd say fewer than 1,000.
So of that 9,000, 1,000 of them were through annexation?
No, the opposite.
And that's a high number, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. Most of it is people moving into the city.
And then is East Missoula scheduled for annexation when?
We have a deferred annexation agreement with East Missoula, and so we can't annex until 2026. So this mayor and this council, I don't think have plans to actually annex it at that time. If it's all that's up in the air, but there's we always have to weigh that service provision versus the costs associated with that service provision versus the tax base. So.
1,000 people that come, is that net and subtracting people die and move away?
Yes. I'm going to shift now a little bit into some city comparisons. So we, as part of our budget process every year, we do some peer city benchmarking, and you can see what we consider our pure Montana cities here. Now, one thing that I think you've heard around is that Missoula has the highest property taxes in the state. And now that's true when you put it in the context of just property taxes and mill levies. We have the highest mill levy rate, and so we have the highest property tax rate. What that excludes, though, is, and I'm going to talk about in general government the things that Jessica was talking about, in the traditional things that are fronted with property taxes. So not our utilities, but but cities, so each city does it a little differently. Missoula is way more reliant on property taxes than any other city in the state. So one thing that we try to do to try to put us on apples to apples, and this chart is an example of that, so we took all of the budgets of our peer cities and calculated revenue per capita. So that means all the assessments, all the citywide assessments, and all of the property taxes, and divided by the population, using those same statistics. This is where we shake out in there, where we're in the middle. We have our revenue per capita, how much we raise per citizen is about average. And this chart shows how we compare those. We broke the assessments and the property taxes onto the same basis. So this is where we converted all of the assessments and converted all of the and the property taxes, all of them on the same basis as mill levies. So they are all the same.
And this is how we look. And again, if you converted all our assessments and property taxes into levies, we're at 2882. We're kind of in the same similar spot and as our peer cities. Now, what you can see here is the colors on the bottom are the property taxes, and Missoula is the highest related to property taxes. What we are the lowest related to special assessments. So we have two special districts, and Jessica talked about those: our road district and our park district. Those are calculated on the same basis of property tax. They look for our purposes of talking to our constituents, we treat them like property taxes. In those other jurisdictions where road maintenance district, which is the same as our road district here, is probably not calculated on the same basis. Most cities use a basis such as front footage of a public street or square footage of a lot, and so they have a different assessment. I mean, it's still an assessment on your property, but it's not but it's a different basis. So we did the exercise of converting all those to mill levies, and so that's where we shake out. So we are, so while it's true we do have the highest property tax mill rate in the state, we have the lowest level of assessment. So it's just, and so context is everything when you hear these things. We what I would like to point out, we are under the same legal constraints that all the other cities. So I would expect us to be kind of in line with our peers, and we are. It's just we're just getting there a slightly different way. This is another interesting chart. This is mill value per capita. So you heard that statewide there is that the Department of Revenue does the valuations of property, and now so they do it statewide for all the communities. But every community has a different real estate value. There's a sense out there that Bozeman is the highest, and that and mill value per capita would indicate that Bozeman is the highest level of property taxes, and then this has Helena, Kalispell, Missoula, and there's some of these. In prior years when we were doing this, Missoula was down here at the bottom. I mean, it was really, we were down at the Great Falls level of mill value per capita, and working with Department, we could not figure that out. Like, why would be in a town where we, compared to our peers, we have a sense that we have a higher real estate value. But now it started catching up. So recently, I think the last appraisal cycle, that was last year, it bumped us up. We bumped up. We jumped past Billings, and got in there. So I think that actually getting more normal. What I'm hopeful. I mean, last year there was large valuation increases in the city. I mean, there's a lot of protests going on, but what the data I think is that we were actually our assessments themselves were low compared to our peers, and the Department of Revenue was catching that up, whether that was intentional or not. I mean, I don't know. I mean, but I think that was what was happening, and it's not so much that it matters what the assessment is on any given day, because it's what you pay in property taxes is both based on the mills and that assessment, but the fact that it goes up so quickly. Right, that's that change, and so you had a question about, well, how much do I expect to go up every year? You can see that in our financial statement. So on the city's website, in the finance department, we have our comprehensive annual financial report, and that whole thing is really thick and boring. But at the back of that thing, there's a lot of great charts. And so, and 10-year trend analysis, and you can see what our mill levies have done over the last 10 years. We average about a 2% increase. It's kind of inflationary, kind of follows what property taxes is and what our inflation rate is, and that's, and it kind of. But then we get some of these outlier years like this last one. The next slide really shows it, that some bumps up and but for the most part we are at these inflationary trends. So this is yeah.
Question. So this stuff is all really interesting, but it would be more interesting if we could also have similar statistics on either cost of living and or average income. So we're about in line here with Great Falls. The cost of living in Great Falls is substantially less than here, at least from my experience. And I'd say the same with Billings. And so it doesn't really matter how much you're paying. What matters is how much you're paying versus how much you're making as a citizen.
Yeah, no, that for sure. I'm coming at this from a narrow context of property tax law and how the assessments are working, and in that comparison, we have had those income parameters and stuff, and comparing to our peers. We're doing that, and want to point out, Missoula County is #1 in the state in wage growth today, which has been great. So I think some of the things that we're doing is working. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Cost of living, which is kind of outside the scope of our property tax, but is an absolutely important key to this whole thing. So this chart shows our atmosphere related to new property, and this goes to your comment about we're having a bunch of growth. How's that translating to city revenues? So what this chart shows is pre-recession averages what I would consider FY05 to FY09, that kind of pre-recession times, and then our history after that. And so pre-recession, we were a thriving community, and we were getting this black line. Can you see that up there? So this black line shows. Well, we get revenues from property taxes in two ways. We have expansion of tax base, so that's new construction, and then we get new revenues from market value. So we can think about those two parameters. But really, the biggest driver in our new revenues is construction, new tax base. And this shows that trend in tax base. So prior to the recession, we were trudging along, and we were getting, these numbers were pretty good. Back here, even up into FY10 after that, and then it tanked. So our tax base growth down here is what we've been receiving. Even in this times in the last few years when we were having record building permits and valuations, that was not translating to the tax base growth we had seen prior to the recession. We never did figure out why that was. I mean, it wasn't a significant change in law or anything to do that. So this top bar shows this is the pre-recession average and this is the post-recession average. We were getting a new tax base growth. What that does is it puts more pressure on us. In order to maintain our level of service, we have less. So we have less new tax base. So we end up having to use levies in order to maintain the level of service. And that's what happened. Now last year, you can see we had this outlier here last year. It was we had a record new construction numbers, and it seems to more accurately reflect what we've been seeing on the ground. So that was 1 year, and so all of us are hoping that that's going to translate. It's going to kind of go back up. We're going to be back up in this area now in the future, which will help that mill levy growth.
So are these new taxes from developments that are coming in, like the triangle or merger town and stuff like that?
Yes.
So just because that's a high profile thing, so as an example, like what would be the taxable revenue off of the mercantile project for you to propose? So you mean before it was built? Yes.
I wouldn't want to. I don't know if I would want to. I can be completely guessing, but it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah, it's going to be something of that factor, yeah.
The pre-Marriott was 20-30 grand a year in taxes, and now it's 400 to 500.
Yeah, it'd be something like that.
In a mill district.
Yes.
So if they're willing to be the base.
Except that we did a withdrawal from the urban renewal districts. So we did capture some of that. In the 2 of the last 3 years, we've done disbursement. So it's not all captured. I mean, you're right. Most of them is captured in the renewal district, but we have done disbursements 2 years.
Do you track properties that are taking out of the tax base, like mountain water properties and eco compost and school district, fire department, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So mountain water is a
reflected here, though?
You don't see it in the. It wouldn't be reflected. It would be reflected in our mill value changes. So Mountain Water is a good example. Mountain Water was the biggest taxpayer in the city of Missoula prior to the city taking ownership of it. And in order to deal with that, so one thing, so it was the biggest taxpayer in city of Missoula, but it was about 2% of the tax base. So we have property taxes. It makes you really. It's a really diverse system because of that. You don't have a lot of risk concentrated in one business or like one industry or something because of our diverse economy. And so that happened. We mitigated that by paying a payment in lieu of tax. So as that came off the tax rolls, the water utility has been paying payment in lieu of tax to all the taxing jurisdictions, so not just in the city, but to the schools and the county that were relying on the tax base, and we're phasing that out over time. But also because it was a regulated utility, every customer of Mountain Water was paying that property tax in their water bills as well. So all the money just stayed in the community anyway. It's just a different way of looking at it. So one thing about property tax, I think one thing that we've been struggling with, council's been struggling with, is that we believe that there's this inherent unfairness building in our property tax system today. This was a property tax system that was designed in an economy that was in the 70s, that was based on large industrial payers, so there's been some legislative changes that have affected this and some and things, but just our economy has changed since the 70s, and so we're looking at, and what this chart shows is just what the tax base looks like from 1999 to 2018. That 20-year period. So, I mean, this is a system that was designed, almost 50 years ago. But this time, you can see the shift to residential that's happening here. So, back in 1999, this is Missoula. 42% of our tax base came from residential. Now it's 60%. Commercial is a smaller piece of our tax base. Business equipment, now this was a policy decision made by the legislature, that business equipment tax cut, that was a shift, and that just a direct shift to residential. And centrally assessed is still a portion of our tax base, but what's happened is centrally assessed are properties, kind of large companies that work across different counties within the state. So Northwestern Energy is the biggest property taxpayer in the state of Montana. They're centrally assessed. But what happens is because of the fewer big industrial payers, this really goes down to back to like the biggest payers in here are like the regulated utilities. So really, what they're doing is that it's still being paid by residences because it's part of your power bill. So that's just that fundamental change, and so this is something that's been shifting. So it is. So Montana's tax used to be just on anything if you were a private business and just tables, chairs, business equipment. What the legislature did was exempted the first $100,000 of value. So only to the extent you have assets over $100,000 it's now taxed. And also because of technology changes, I think this is another economic change. We're just less asset intensive. You don't have, manufacturers. We have actually quite a little strong cottage industry of manufacturing happening in Missoula, but it's all little people in garages that can do all this. You don't have to have this scale anymore that you used to because of these technology changes. So it's just a fundamental change. And so now I think our property tax system is now shifting a burden to residences.
Are apartment complexes considered residential?
I have to go back to the law. Yes. So their tax is residential. They're not. So commercial is a little. So one thing I'll add in here. So commercial is taxed at a little bit of a higher rate. Their taxable values are calculated at a higher percentage. But that even. This decrease even shows that because that has been decreasing over time too. So those policy shifts are happening. But so apartment complexes, if I'm correct, are being taxed at a residential rate, and they would be included in this number there.
And then the previous slide, where we saw the big increase to 8.5 million. What's the breakdown there in regards to, in that 1 year span, single family residence versus multi-dwelling units versus commercial construction?
I don't have that data.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Sure did.
Yeah.
On the one you just left, the residential percentage, do you know what it was before the reevaluation in 2018 on residentials?
I don't off the top of my head. So the Department of Revenue's website has all this information, and so it's easy, and it's actually pretty easy to get to, and they have these great charts, and you can download the data. So it's up there.
The term property tax relief, would that show less of a percentage in residential and more of a percentage in commercial? And maintain the same level of services?
I guess I don't understand the question.
So what does property tax relief mean to you?
Well, I guess it would be a program where people actually have to pay less in tax.
But you can't have reduced services. So
right.
If you're paying less, how does that get shifted and where does it get shifted?
Well, so what I would say is, so at the local government level, we don't have any of those property tax relief programs. They're all done at the state level, and they are done. So there is a one. Probably the most used example is the elderly homeowner renter credit, tax credit. I think that Form 2EC. I don't know if I'm a tax nerd. So that one, but that's an income tax. That's an income tax deduction based on property taxes. There are some reliefs for low income and elderly property tax rebates, but those are all administered by the state. Montana, as a rule, has very little property tax relief systems. Yeah, so. You see that in other states where a big economic development project comes in and we're going to waive property taxes for the first 10 years of the project. There's no mechanism in Montana to do something like that. So one thing that has been a big goal in our strategic plan has been trying to diversify our revenue base and try to get a shift away from this property tax system that we believe is now inherently unfair. And so this is a chart that was put together by the Montana Budget and Policy Center, and what it shows, this is Montana's tax climate today, and what it shows is how regressive our property tax system is today. So on how these categories work, this is the lowest 20% of earners' income for Montana. And so 5.3% of their wages go to property taxes, where in the highest tax brackets, property taxes are only 1.6%. And you can see even the sales taxes that we have today in Montana, which are gasoline and cigarette, alcohol taxes. Those are even less regressive than our property tax system today. So that's that's one thing we want to advocate for. Just making sure that the legislature and our constituents know that the system is unfair, and not only that, it's regressive, and it's the most regressive tax we have.
Hey, Dale, would you go back there? Would you talk in contrast to progressive income tax? Just so that.
Oh yeah, good point. And so you can see income tax, which particularly something where you're measuring it based on as a percentage of income, and the tax is based on that. Yeah, you can see that it lines up pretty well. That it is the least regressive of all the taxes, and as your income goes higher, you pay a bigger percentage of your income is paid, but you also are making a bigger wage. So it's obviously the most progressive tax system out there.
Question: how does the state go about beginning to correct that?
Well, that's a big tax reform model. So we've been working on, the city, and so I was with Missoula County prior to this, and we've been, being kind of parochial, we want to deal with our own stuff. Is we want to be able to ask our voters to have a local option sales tax that we would target, and to be able to build it that it wouldn't be, be able to exempt things, such as basic needs that we wouldn't be, to try to keep it as progressive as possible. I've been working on that, so, my first legislature working on that was in 2001, and there has not been an appetite to do that. I think there's more, I think as our property tax system has increasingly become more unfair, I hear a lot more people talking about it now. So we're hopeful that time is coming, because I think what we're doing now ain't working. So.
Okay, I won't dwell on it, but I'll ask one more question. So increasing revenue to the government is one thing, but reversing a trend is a different thing. So how would a tourism tax change this at all?
So I think it really isn't just about adding new revenue. It is about property tax reform. So I don't think we can have getting the ability to have a local option sales tax without a meaningful property tax relief. I think you have to have that, and that's part of it. And so I think the example that exists in Montana is whitefish. So whitefish, there are certain resort communities, the population threshold is like 3,000, something like that, that you can have a local option sales tax. So whitefish was grandfathered in, so they've had theirs now. And they rebate 25% of their resort tax back to the property taxpayers. And how you see that on your tax bill is that you get a credit. When you see that on your tax bill, you see deduct from, here's my bill, it's $1,000, and I'm getting $250 off of that in local income tax. Now, obviously, whitefish is a high tourist area, and so in our studies of them, the residents in whitefish get a way bigger rebate than they actually pay in their own sales tax up there, because it's largely paid by visitors. And I think given the ability to do that here, we could do something similar where we're looking at events and liquor by the glass and restaurant meals, rental cars, those type of things. I think we can target those.
Isn't there a fuel tax being looked at, and then would that directly impact property taxes, or is that just an extra infrastructure?
Yeah, so Missoula County, the county commissioners have placed a question on the June primary ballot to ask the voters if you would like to see a 2-cent increase on gas tax for infrastructure improvements. Now that one, so that is a local option tax that we do have the counties have the local ability to ask the voters for that. But it's not very large. It's capped at 2 cents. That's the amount maximum, and it would raise about $1.2 million a year. In revenues that would help. So what it would do, so the city, the way it's been placed on the ballot is that the city would receive half of that revenues, and so that's about $600,000 a year. But that's a fairly significant road project that we would get done in a year that we would otherwise have to that we would either not do or be a property tax burden.
The proposal is to split that 50/50 with the county, correct?
Yeah.
Great.
So you briefly mentioned it about kind of the public having the appetite to take on a tourist or local sales tax option. Because I think a lot of us view it as another tax that you would talk about. The ideal way of using that is to reduce the property tax values that are shown. You mentioned that whitefish does that in a sense. Is there any other? So I think what people are hesitant about is saying, yeah, that sounds like a great trade-off. If we can increase 10% in local sales tax option, but increase property by 10, we get a property tax cut and pass on to the tourists. Is there options or instances that you guys look at when you're looking at these scenarios where that doesn't happen? So where the local municipality says, we're going to do this local sales tax option and we'll reduce property values or property tax values, but then they just keep going up and the property owners don't really actually see a tangible reduction in what they're paying.
You know, I'm not aware of that. So what the resort tax is pretty flexible in Montana law, but it has a pretty narrow application. So there are a lot of communities that do it. St. Regis, I think it's the closest one to us. You know, Big Sky, even though they're not incorporated, they have it. And so there's several of these out there. But what happens is that the voters can help decide that. So, you know, if let's say City Council was going to be able to place that on the ballot, that would be part of that public process to say, how much of this do we want to go back to property tax reduction? You know, so is it 25%? Is it 50%? Is it 90%? I mean, all of those things are part of that. Now, so in Whitefish is the example. We did a case study of Whitefish, so I can name some of those things off the top of my head. But they've done 3 votes on their local option tax, and most recently they did one, and they're to fund some additional water improvements and those things. But it passed with 70% of the vote. So it's been a tool that community has embraced.
Mary, I saw in your letter to the city council that you were advocating for a tourist tax. When would the proposed horizon be seen on a ballot?
Well, so the state would have to allow us to do that, and thus far has not. And we've been at nearly every legislative session for the last 20 years, along with other cities and towns, asking for the opportunity to put it before the voters. And so far, no takers.
I've been on council 6 years plus, and have been advocating for it that entire time. And it's not that I believe that there's a sense that the public's not ready for it. I want the opportunity as mayor to bring to the public an option or options to discuss. The hesitancy, the resistance is from the state legislature.
So just a little bit of background on, you know, what Whitefish has versus what Missoula is able to do right now. So there is a resort tax that is currently in state law, and it's only for communities that are 5,000 or maybe 5,500 and smaller in population. So that's why you'll see it in places like Whitefish and West Yellowstone. And so that's what they're using. And in that law, as it's currently written, 25% of that revenue has to go to property tax relief. The way Whitefish does it is they actually have a line item on the property tax bill that says this much of your bill was offset by our resort tax revenue. But again, the population limit on that is 5,000. And so proposals that have come to the legislature in the last couple of sessions, or that have been crafted and maybe have not actually been introduced to the legislature, have really mirrored that, where they would have a requirement of at least 25% property tax relief. That's the way the proposals have been written. And they would have to come before the voters. And so City Council would be able to put it on the ballot for the voters, and in that ballot language it would have to say 25% of it is going to property tax reduction, you know, and a portion of it goes to this and a portion of it goes to that, and it's this percent, and none of those things, as far as the percent of property tax relief, that percentage can't be reduced without going back to the voters, and that percentage of the tax itself can't be increased without going back to the voters. So that's the way the resort tax is currently written. That's the way the local option proposals have been written recently, and the state legislature just has not allowed us to, they keep failing that bill, and they haven't allowed us to put that on the ballot for our voters.
I was just wondering, what's the reason behind it? Like, what did they say?
No new taxes.
For the state, I guess.
No new taxes.
You know, the real issue behind it is it's an urban versus rural issue. So, you know, the urban centers, the cities, in fact, all the cities would like this authority. But it's that rural components. They don't want to, you know, you don't want to, you go into Billings to go to Costco, you don't want to pay Billings as a sales tax, even though you are part of the issue related to that level of service delivery that all cities have to provide.
I just want to say the Montana Budget and Policy Center is a really good resource for education around progressive tax structure and a more equitable tax structure, and they lobby in the legislature. So if you're interested in this, I would definitely suggest looking at it.
Ryan, did you have one more question?
Yes, are there other, this is for anybody, are there other ways to get things on the ballot, kind of like medical marijuana was, wasn't that citizen initiated?
Yes.
How does
Yeah, so I mean, I can't quote the state law off the top of my head, but but there is an initiative process that we've actually talked about. Like, do we want to bring this as a statewide? We have to bring it as a statewide initiative. There is a requirement that you collect. It has to be a diverse. You can't get them all in Missoula. It has to be a diverse set of signatures from around the state. I don't know what those are like. Yeah.
Has anybody talked about that? Or?
It's been talked about. It's never been done. Yeah.
If you're willing to champion, let us know.
Something to ask.
So, how do our voters feel about this? So this is a question that we asked in our recent City of Missoula survey. This was a survey that was about, was asking the general direction of Missoula. How do you think the city's doing? What do you think the biggest issues facing Missoula? And then we asked specific questions about, like, how do you feel about police services and fire service, et cetera. Just as a side, so the two biggest issues that were raised during that were property taxes and roads. So those are things that are kind of rising to the top right now in our strategic plans. But we asked kind of cold. So would you be supportive of Missoula adopting a 3% tax on tourist-oriented activities? And this was just asked as part of that survey, just to gauge support. And you can see these. I think it seems like our constituents are ready. 28% strongly support, 25% support. It would indicate without any prompting at all 2 years ago that was supported.
Is there a stigma of being a Montana resident, though, and what's the definition of a tourist? So if I go to Billings, am I a tourist?
Well, I think what they would be is if they're not going to check your ID to see if you're from Billings. It's going to be the type of activity. So if you live here in Missoula and you rent a car, I mean, you're actually going to pay a tourist tax. It's a state one. But if there was a local option, you'd pay that. But it would be related to those type of activities that are mostly tourist oriented. Is how the mayor and council have envisioned it. Yeah. Exactly.
I'm a resident of Missoula. I'm still a tourist if I go to that.
Yeah. So that's how it would be related to those types of activities.
I was just curious how you distributed the survey.
It was a phone survey. It was done by a pollster. It was this sample size was.
About 600, which is statistically significant for a city this size. We partnered with the University of Montana, and they worked with a polling firm that they have, and they helped us craft those questions. And so it was a phone survey randomly asked of people who appear on the voting rolls within the city of Missoula. Yeah.
So that was our last slide.
So, out of curiosity, could you go back to that last slide? And with a show of hands, who in this room would actually strongly support a 3% tourist tax? Okay. How about neutral? How about opposed or strongly opposed? Okay.
Assuming that it would be a reduction in property tax?
I know.
So you've seen a ton of numbers here, right? I want to talk a little bit with you about why we have a budget in the first place, right? So the budget is a reflection, or should be a reflection, of community values and the investment we're willing to make in the things that we share and value. So early on, governments were formed to do things collectively that no one could do individually or no one could do collectively, privately, and make a buck, right? So we decided that we would collectively invest. That's called a tax, but it is a collective investment in our community. And what that collective investment does is you elect people like me, like Brian, like Heather, and others to be stewards of that collective investment. And
our budget document annually is really about trying to make sure that those values are inherent in the way we're spending money. So if you look at the way we spend money, what do we value most? Public safety, right? Right, half the budget roughly, right? And you look at the rest of those slices of the pie, and you see other reflections of community value. Now there are administrative costs, right? You have to account for all this stuff, right? You have to fund the various branches of government, including the judicial in our case. But fundamentally, Missoulians care about a place that's safe. When you call 911, you want somebody to show up, whether it's a person in blue or a person in a call out. And so that's where we put the lion's share of our investment, right? But then you look at streets, you look at parks, which are an extraordinary value in our community. Over and over again, we hear from residents that parks and open space matter to them, and they matter so much that when we ask them if they're willing to make that investment by taxing themselves, they do it, right? So as you look at the budget, the numbers are interesting, but fundamentally it's about providing the services that people in our community value. And so when I go through our budget process on an annual basis, it's really about a reflection of what those values are, whether we want to continue to deliver on those values, whether we need to adjust based on things we're hearing, things that are changing, who gets elected. That's a great way to understand whether or not you're doing budgeting right, is whether you have a job 4 years after you deliver your first, second, third, and fourth budgets. That's an indication, right? So fundamentally, the numbers are what they are, but at the end, they're about providing service, right? And services that just don't make sense if we were to privatize them. There are some cases, you had mentioned cemetery. Cemetery is a horrible business to be in. Horrible business to be in, right? So we subsidize Missoula City Cemetery to the tune of about $800,000 a year. That's to maintain that facility because the community has expressed a value. We want a permanent place, a public place to bury people or to inter ashes. We probably wouldn't do that today, right? If we were to think about our priorities and what we're going to do, would we necessarily go into the cemetery business? I think the answer is probably no. But at the time, nobody else was doing it because there was no money in it, right? Fire departments, there's money in those, isn't there? I don't know if you noticed one of the stats that Dale had. Fire calls in 2011, about the time Chief Painter retired, way down. He leaves, boom. And I'm not sure what the cause and effect is there. So as we go through this budget process on an annual basis, we look at a number of things, mostly about maintaining level of service, right? So what we have today, we want to make sure that we can continue to deliver tomorrow as a function of that budget. And year in and year out, if you were to look at the trend, it's about 3% a year, right? Our costs go up something on the order of 3% a year. Your taxes, your property tax bill, if you look over the course of from about 2005 until now, you're going to see about 3% a year. Okay? That's the sort of alignment that takes place, barring new revenue. Now, new revenue changes that picture, right? So, for example, this year, because of that spike in growth, to make the budget work, to provide the level of service that we're providing today in this budget, without that increased newly taxable value, without the pie growing bigger, we would have had choices to make. We either don't maintain level of service or we tax folks more. And it's as simple as that. And it's not pretty, but it's a fact of the matter. The other thing that people sometimes don't understand about municipal government is some folks think I'm a tax and spend mayor. Well, the federal government, it's a no tax and spend system, right? We don't do deficit spending. We can't statutorily do deficit spending. Doesn't mean we don't have debt, but all our debt has to be managed within our means. So we don't create gajillion-dollar deficits and then hand that deficit back to somebody at the end of the day, whenever the end of the day is. But that stuff comes home to roost, and it doesn't come home to roost here, because that's not the way we balance our budgets.
So I think there was one of the slides that was like 9% of the spending was on debt servicing. So you're saying we can't make that debt worse, but we're stuck with spending 9% of our money on the debt we have, and if so, is that something that the city is trying to change? I don't know how that compares to past years.
So there are some things that you simply can't do without debt because we don't have enough cash on hand. So if we're going to build fire stations, for example, you pass a bond, you vote for a bond to improve our fire facilities, which voters did in 2006. That money isn't collected on year one, right? So
I guess it is because you said, statutorily you have to balance budget, but you're saying so if something's on the ballot, then we can break the bank by voting for it?
You're not
but we're borrowing more money than we have on.
Right, you're not deficit spending if you have a mortgage. Your budget balances, right? Yeah. But you can't have more debt than you have income.
And so essentially our debt, as a city, it's like your mortgage, it's like your car payment. You have an asset, you have a budget that you're working within, you're going to have that asset for a while, right? Federal government, a lot of what they do is like credit card spending, except there's no minimum payment, so they just keep putting it on and putting it on and putting it on. So that's kind of the difference.
Like 9%, that's
not
insignificant.
We do have
what's our target?
Yep, so we have a set of financial policies and goals. And so, and we're also statutorily capped. We can only take on so much debt based on state law, and we're well below that cap. I don't know off the top of my head what our goal is.
Well, I think Jessica's point is a really good one in that all of our debt is related to purchasing an asset that has a useful life that's long, and the debt is at least as long as that useful life. So we just did our biggest debt issuance in history was the acquisition of the water system. So that is a big portion of that 9%. If I'm thinking if that chart is citywide, but you know what? We're paying that debt with rates that are 6% lower than they were under Mountain Water. So it's all about context related to those things. So that's that investment that's worth it. So most of our general obligation debt, we have fire stations and the aquatics bond that was done. And so what's really hard for us to do is if we wanted to save that up, we'd still have to raise taxes, and then we just save that money in a pool somewhere, and then we get to build it someday. So what debt does is, one, it gets us the ability to have the users of that also pay for it. So, voters pass a bond, we get to build a facility, and then the voters who are going to actually use it are going to help pay that debt. So, Fort Missoula Regional Park, that's a county one, but that's an example of, like, if we had to save all of that, when we started saving, by the time we got enough the cash, Grandma wouldn't be able to use the facility anymore, and so those are those principles related to our use of debt.
And I would add, and when you think about it personally, who here amongst us would be able to save money to buy their first house and pay for it in cash? It would take your lifetime, right? And the same idea with the assets that we have as a city, be them roads, facilities, whatever they might be. They are multi-generational assets, and to be able to pay for them over multiple generations gives the benefit of folks to be able to use them today and the next generation, and we all get to pay for it as we go along. That's the benefit. Right.
Mayor, I like your description of the tax as a collective input and how it should represent the values of the community. I think that's a really effective way of looking at it. I wonder about the public services like fire, ambulance, and police. So I don't know the answer to this. Is it common for ambulance to be privatized in communities?
It is not. It's not common. In Montana, it's not common around the nation, but in Montana it is.
And is that a financial decision that it makes more sense to have that?
It's really a mixed bag.
Okay.
Some of it's about whether there is a private business that's willing to do that work. And historically in Missoula, there's been a private entity that's done that work. We run up against a couple of things. One is if we were to tip up an ambulance service today, the Chamber of Commerce would be on my doorstep saying you're putting a viable private business out on the street, right? So generally speaking, provided that there is service provision, I mean, we acquired the water company because we needed to acquire the water company, but provided that there's a private service provision that is reasonable, and even if it is sort of in the scope of what municipal governments do, we're likely to defer to that. What we have done, however, is protect ourselves. So the private ambulance company here is Missoula Emergency Services, and we have an agreement with Missoula Emergency Services. They post a bond to us because in some cases private ambulance companies go away overnight, and suddenly there's no provision of that service, and municipalities are left holding the bag and trying to figure that out overnight. So we have a bond that allows us basically to tip up an ambulance company overnight if that's what we needed to do. We have that revenue in place.
That was going to be part of the question, but the other part of it is we learned when we met with our fire department that they're incredibly well trained and competent in medical services. It seems like all they're missing is the trucks and of course some additional staff, but they do an excellent job of training and maintaining services.
So we're doing some experimentation right now. So we have 2 ambulances right now at the Missoula Fire Department. And we're experimenting with having 2 folks in those ambulances on kind of busy nights to sort of not only support the private ambulance company, but to support the larger fire department. So we roll, on a medical aid call, we roll an engine company, right? So that's 4 people on a big old truck, often a battalion chief rolls along, and then we have to backfill that. So each one of those medical aid calls for service is a big deal, and we're trying to look at that model and understand whether we can do that more efficiently and effectively.
I worked in the community when I was much younger, when I was on an ambulance with a private company, and there was also a city service. And I'm not sure exactly at that age I didn't really pay attention to how they interacted, but it was interesting they had both and they were functioning well together. And so the other part of my question with the police and ambulance as a part of community value, we do value safety, but I feel like that's a very significant chunk of the budget, of course, and I'm not sure I agree that it's something that we decide on. So I don't know, do we actually decide that we want police there within 3 minutes and not 4 minutes or 5 minutes? It sounds like from what we learned, a lot of that is regulated by the state and federal government and their training regimes and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of mandatory. Once we decide we want to have fire, that's a cost that we don't really have much control over, it sounds like.
I mean, there are a number of costs that we don't have much control over if we want to maintain a level of service. One of the questions we have, though, that we have to ask ourselves as the community grows, what is level of service? What's the expected response time? So that's one of our benchmark measures, right? How quickly after the engine company's dispatched are we on scene? And that's a critical issue.
And that is discussed here at your level?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we have level of service goals in fire, and when we start to get longer response times, that's when we start to have to think about, do we need a new station? Do we need a substation? Right? So there's a time when you're too late, and we don't want to be too late. Police is another example, right? So everyone has a camera now, right? And there are cameras everywhere. So we have much more evidence around. So the kid who boosts a 6-pack of beer, when Doug and I were enjoying our misspent youth, right? Somebody would call the police and we'd say, chances of us finding that person who boosted that in those days, $1.99 six-pack of Schmitty, we're not going to catch them. We'll take your report. We know it happened. There's no expectation we're going to catch you. Now, I got a video, right? And it's everything. I got a video, and the expectation that we're going to follow up on those misdemeanors is really high. And some communities have said, look, property crime at this level, we're out. Yeah, we'll take your report. We don't investigate. We investigate them all.
And so one last question associated with that. So, of course, these things aren't all individual pieces of the pie. They're all connected.
Right.
And so when I think about what you're talking about police, I look at my tax bill and I see that we spend, or I pay $1.60 for mental health treatment, and I pay $7 for the County Historical Museum. So that seems a little backwards, especially considering part of our increased need for policing services is largely mental health concerns. So how at the higher level of government that you guys work, do you figure out when we have that problem, how to invest? Do we just keep adding more officers, or at some point is there a necessity to think more about mental health treatment, addiction treatment, the drugs in our streets, all that kind of stuff?
There's an absolute necessity to do that, and so we're approaching that through a number of initiatives. One is I sit on a mental health task force. We are very good at trying to address problems on the back end when they are manifest. We're not very good at trying to address them when we could do something about them. Mental health is a great example, right? So we're ready to roll on any crisis, any mental health crisis you might have. We can get there in 7 to 8 minutes.
But we can't prevent it.
But we haven't done the much less expensive thing, and that is figure out a way for you to have appropriate access to care before you're in crisis, or if you are in crisis. So one of the examples that I trot out pretty regularly is if you're in crisis in Missoula today, mental health crisis, co-occurring crisis, you name it, you're on the streets. An officer really has two choices. We're gonna charge you with a crime and take you to the posting. We're gonna take you to the jail where you don't belong, you don't get fixed. We're gonna take you to the emergency room where you likely also don't belong and you don't get fixed. One of those options is more expensive than the other, certainly, but jail ain't cheap, and the person doesn't get fixed. So they're out of jail, and we'll see them tomorrow night, right? Mm-hmm. And we'll rinse and repeat. We'll do that over. And so part of what we're trying to do is talk systemically, and a lot of this has to do with the criminal justice system, but talk systemically about, well, what if we made some investment up front in appropriate care for someone? So one of the things we're doing is this Trinity project that we're doing on some excess property at the Missoula County Jail. We're going to have 50 units there in a 24-hour center to help people navigate into a shelter, a home, right? Whereas we just don't have that today. So an officer is not going to leave somebody on the street in that crisis. That's a place that person can go, get help at the appropriate level. That will save the system a ton of money, but it's really hard to have that conversation about, well, make this, your hospital, make this investment here, rather than do $13 million of charity care next year, because it's what we've always done. It's really easy to do what we've always done. Thank you.
I agree with the questions that this gentleman was just asking. I've worked many years in mental health, and now I'm on the board of the Missoula Senior Center. And if you look at the mill levy for aging services, they get a fair amount in aging services. None of that money at all goes to the senior center except for a small reimbursement for meals for people who come and get a meal at the senior center. So in a similar fashion, could any examination go to that mill levy, because aging services gets quite a bit of money and they do amazing work, but the senior center provides
enormous services for many, many seniors that come. Some people come from Valley County for all sorts of services, yoga, tai chi, the lunches, contra dances, all sorts of things. And could any look be given to maybe a conversation with Aging Services to maybe provide money for a director, because except for money for a cook and I think a bookkeeper, everything there is done by volunteers. That entire agency is run by volunteers. So, and you know, a lot of seniors get really supportive mental health care there, just to get away from an isolated life. And again, less than 1%, I think, on that chart was devoted to sort of social services in the city. So maybe, I don't know.
So other long-term trend here that we're not demonstrating is the general application of the federal and state government to do the things that they have traditionally done, particularly around healthcare, mental health, physical health, all of that. That money continues to dry up. So local jurisdictions we're getting into businesses that we were never in before because the feds ain't doing it anymore. So I have had a number of conversations with the Senior Citizens Board over the years. There is some fear that if the city contributes to helping the senior center, that the mayor is going to shut down Bridge. There's a lot of distrust there. And there is also accountability with public money.
Yeah.
And the senior center to date has chosen not to take the public money because of the strings attached to it, generally speaking. But yeah, we're trying to figure out ways to support the community, and that's a place that...
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for the work you do on this front. I was just curious about getting back to the numbers when you see $1.60 versus $7.50.
Yeah.
How much control do you have to switch 25 cents into something else? Do you have?
We have some control over that. So mill levies, for example. So the museum levy is a voted levy. So that's another case where a group got together. Did a local ballot initiative and said, we want a mill levy to support museums. And there it is. Library, similarly. So what you're seeing there is a question that was put to voters and then supported.
I wonder if it would come out the same as what we're voting on now.
Good question, right? Yeah, and we don't, you know,
it's a big chunk. That's
well, and we have. So in those cases, the voted levies, those are pots of money that are explicitly used for those purposes. So the choice really isn't there. And
it's just interesting because you get actually in there home going, well, I would have put 50 cents into this and 60 cents into that.
Oh, totally. Yeah. No, wheat district, let them grow, right?
How is the Trinity project being funded?
So it is all private.
The question there?
How is the Trinity project being funded? So it is privately funded, though it's privately funded through a tax credit program. So these are low-income housing tax credits, the non-competitive 4%. And the project is at a scale where the tax credits combined with the gift of land from Missoula County makes the project pencil, not only in terms of construction, but there are operational revenues. They can staff it as well. So we don't have tax dollars per se in it. Federal tax dollars as a function of the credit. And then the gift of land. But it's basically a self-contained, self-funded project.
Is it a lifetime credit or?
Yes. Yeah.
U.S. Bank would love to look at that.
Okay, good.
So I'm going to go back to what we were talking about, the ambulances being private versus public, because I also had a kind of a long discussion when we were at the fire station with one of the head firefighters or whoever about that issue.
They all think they're head
But the way that you said that made it sound kind of like the city government is being bullied by the Chamber of Commerce into prioritizing private profit over public health. Because what ends up happening is, well, AEP told me that the firefighters are much better EMTs because they're much more experienced, because the people who work for the ambulance companies, they don't stay for very long because they don't get paid, because they're much less experienced. But also it is a much bigger burden on the citizen to get slapped with a multi-$1,000 bill as opposed to paying a tax.
I don't disagree with any of that.
Yeah, but it's like, are you guys being bullied by the Chamber of Commerce?
We're less being bullied, but I think we're trying to figure out whether we want to pick that fight and then whether it's the right fight to pick. You're going to have expenses associated with that ambulance ride. We don't know today what tipping up that business looks like. I don't know how much it would cost. Haven't done an analysis to understand whether we could actually deliver that service at a lower cost. We may be able to.
I have one thing too. The other half of that relationship where there is an expectation that the fire department and the city has of the private ambulance service, but the ambulance service also has a contract right now to provide service to city limits, and they have a pretty good working relationship with the firefighters and the other emergency agencies in the area. So that's something that have to be addressed as well. If the city decides to pick that up, is that we have to wait for that contract to expire as well.
Right.
When does that expire, do you know?
The 5-year contract.
I don't remember actually. And for me, that contract is relatively new, like within the last 10 years or so.
I think part of it is too is that NC is also a training ground for some of our firefighters and other staffers too. So we gain from that business as well as a community. It's not just the real competitive thing.
Well, it's very easy to say we gain as a community, or like the guy was telling me, like it's less expensive for taxpayers to pay like per ride or something. But then what happens is that people avoid calling an ambulance when they're hurt. They're getting less experienced ambulance EMTs. You know, I think it ends up being a lot harder this way.
It's imperfect.
So I would like you to take on a new business. Along with Missoula Water, it would be great to own our own garbage service and have recycling, which is something that obviously private companies can't make any money for.
We're going up against the mafia.
We are going up against the mafia. The heck with the Chamber of Commerce. Who I used to work for, by the way. But it's a huge and I think identified interest in our community, and if we do budgets that reflect the values of our community, recycling and our plan for the future, sustainable and otherwise, has got to include that, and I would love to hear what you have to say.
Sure. So the question is, why don't we run the garbage service, and why don't I take it over? And then there was a reference to the mafia.
Yeah.
But the short version is I think those conversations continue. The community is very interested in that. They're very interested in recycling and how that works. They're very interested in. Just had a meeting with folks today about hauling compost and what that looks like, and they might make a foray into construction waste, and maybe some curbside recycling. The other municipalities in the state, and this is off the top of my head, Helena, Great Falls, maybe?
I don't know what Helena is municipal.
Yeah, so there are a number of municipal trash hauling operations. The challenges we have, we don't have a landfill, and we don't have equipment. Unlike Mountain Water, the other piece is it's not necessarily a monopoly. It doesn't have to be a monopoly, and I think there could be some competition in the private sector. I think certainly if Republic wanted to pull the plug, we would be happy to try to figure out a way to make that work. We don't do the business today. We're not engaged in it, but there's clear interest. Not sure if I'm ready to take another one on.
So through the eco compost, we could be seeing, because we do construction and there's huge opportunity there, I think, of construction waste, especially as you see that taxable revenue growing. You know that there's tons of stuff going into that landfill.
Yeah, and so one of the things we try to do is seize opportunity when it presents itself.
Yeah.
Republic isn't going out of business today. The ambulance company isn't going out of business today. Eco Compost was going to go out of business, right? So what we understood about them over time, first we acquired the land under them, and then they said, well, why don't you just buy it? And there weren't any other takers, right? So we acquired that because we thought it was a meaningful municipal service that was going to go missing if we didn't step in. And when we stepped in, we also take the profit motive out of it, right? So we're an at-cost business, not a cost-plus business. That's why the water deal worked so well.
Yeah.
So there are cases when we see these opportunities and we'll seize them. Yeah.
So you're saying you're going to see that recycling opportunity?
Well, yeah.
I mean, I'd be willing to pay. It's so affordable to go to Eco Compost for $8 versus the landfill where they're charging me $22.
Yeah. I'm still trying to find a way to do recycling right, because that's challenging in and of itself. Whenever we buy stuff or collect stuff and have to sell it, we're not very good at selling stuff. So the compost facility, one of our challenges is we got to sell the stuff. It's not what local governments do very well, so we've got to sort that out. In the case of recycling, I got to figure out what to do with these funky commodities that are worth something one day and worthless the next, and all of that.
Complicated, I get it.
So Helen is a city-county operation. So my question is, going back to the budget, does the city have a budget or a credit rating?
We do.
And has that changed over the last 10 years along with this taxation issue?
So we have credit ratings. So bonds are rated separately. Typically, are we an A today?
Our credit is A. Municipal general credit is A plus or A minus. I don't remember off the top of my head. It is something in those categories.
It's good.
Yeah, and it has during my career in municipal government, we've been upgraded once.
And the last part I'll be quiet, is you said about my question about the cemetery, that there's nobody that wants to be in the cemetery business. And yet the community does have departments in which I think of as businesses, the street department, the sewer, those things that who evaluates whether or not your administration is efficient in that, as opposed to someone else that might be
private.
So in the case of the cemetery, we just did the cemetery strategic plan, and we called in a consultant to help us understand, based on everything they know around the country, how our cemetery works, what we might be able to do to optimize it. The cemetery business as we run it isn't great. We sell land one time forever and promise to maintain it for about $700, right? What? It is, no, it's infill for sure, right? Right? Small lot development all day long. And I think the private cemetery folks will tell you that the cemetery isn't where they make the money, but they're selling all of the services commensurate with it. We don't do that. When we even had a conversation about doing headstones, We had a crowd in this room saying, "You're screwing local businesses." You compete at cost, and it's not fair.
I got a question about the mountain line. Is there a itemized line item on my tax bill?
Missoula Urban Transportation District.
Okay, that's mountain line.
Yep.
And then the city contributes $100,000 a year as part of the partnership in the zero fare program.
Any federal money?
A ton of federal money.
Okay.
Yeah, a ton.
But that line item is directly for the mountain line?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I'm going to use this opportunity for you to return. Yeah, sorry, right? That's all right.
When did you have this?
Not my first time through this. Silently while I go forward. I just want to mention some process things and then highlight a couple things. I appreciate that you really want to ask any questions. If you were to go on to the city's fiscal year 2020 budget page on the website, perhaps Heather or someone associated with the class can send this out, you kind of see a run-through of the budget process last year. And then I mentioned this because this is largely what we will do again this year. And it starts out with the mayor's budget letter where he articulates a lot of these values, results from surveys, what we did in joint city council administration, strategic planning, etc. But it's distillation of sort of priorities and then ultimately a proposed budget. And then there's, by date, you can see we started in early July and went through until August 14th, every week in what we call Budget Committee of the Whole. So when I was here the first time, we have COW, Committee of the Whole, and then we have Budget Committee of the Whole. And as the council president, I preside over those meetings. And every week we kind of take up different areas, different departments, fire, police, etc., through the entire administration's budget and go through those. You'll see a lot of links on there to the details of the various components of the budget. So wanted to give a heads up. And before that, what you will perhaps read about or see come through committees is we'll be doing mid-year, a little bit later than mid-year, budget reviews with the departments, which is really sort of our pre-budget work. And it's where we check in with the departments on how they're doing against their prior fiscal year or their current fiscal year budget. But at a very high level, we're not, wanting to check how are you doing on copy paper or something like that. It's big picture, how are you doing against your budget, and then highlights things that are sort of extraordinary that the department wants to highlight, and then it's a preview of what's coming up, what the department is likely to highlight in terms of new priorities and new requests in the next budget cycle. So it's a little bit of a preview for that. So I often think of it as part of the budget process, even though we're reviewing the current year's budget. I'm happy afterwards if anyone wants to ask more questions about that process. A couple things I just wanted to highlight from the discussion. We can't talk enough in here about, when you ask a question, sir, it's a great question of what does property tax relief look like? I wanted to jump up and say property tax, one aspect of property tax relief, to me, is what we talked about with local option. And you guys, your questions on this were excellent, and it's not just new revenue. That component of property tax relief that's statutorily designated in the tourism tax is that part that would directly go back to property taxpayers. If I am looking at taxes at a local level on rental cars and hotel rooms, and perhaps it's, some of the communities do like mixed drinks or something like that. Do I buy some mixed drinks out during the course of the year? I'm the father of a 7-year-old, so yes. Mixed drinks. But proportionately, the new revenue we would get in from tourists to the town is way more, and the relief that I would see, even paying that tax occasionally, far exceeds what I'm going to expend in terms of additional expense. And someone mentioned how Whitefish does it on their property tax bill. That's the way to do it, where you literally see what the property tax bill would be before the property tax relief associated with the tourism tax, and then that rebate, essentially. Columbia Falls, interestingly, I just saw is putting a resort tax on the ballot, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but it's worth reading the articles from Columbia Falls about why they're doing it, and it's deferred investments in infrastructure, it's roads, it's water, It's these things where they've fallen behind the curve in maintaining these, and they're looking for additional revenue to fill those gaps. I would not peg Columbia Falls as the bastion of liberal, progressive, sort of policy and stuff, and I think it is, we're seeing a groundswell of interest across the state from communities in the ability, beyond just communities that have a population of 3,500 or 5,000 or whatever it is, in this, because we're all facing the same kind of issues with the current property tax system. A couple other things. One of the things I always like to look at and sort of gauge over time is not just how my wife and I bought a house right when our daughter was born about 7 years ago. I don't advise doing those things together, but we did. And it was the classic sort of $250,000 median house at the time. And so it's been this kind of good indicator as, home values have gone up, as taxes have gone up, et cetera. But a metric you don't talk about much, but I think is worth looking at, is your property taxes as a percentage of your home value, and compare that to other communities. We are consistently in a 1.1, 1.15, 1.2% sort of range. That's very middle of the road, frankly, across the country for pure communities. And I wanted to highlight, I think Dale kind of underplayed it, this issue of when he was talking about assessments, when he was showing those bar graphs, those stacked bar graphs. It's really critical to appreciate that an apples-to-apples comparison of our community to other communities in Montana, you have to be looking at the pure property tax levies as well as the special districts. And as you said, for us, that's our Park and Road District. Billings does, I believe, public safety within a district. And what makes it difficult is that there isn't consistency across all the communities in Montana as to how they deploy their special districts. Follow what's going on in Bozeman right now. They are putting 2 voters in Bozeman a Harp district. Why are they doing that? Because they have a maintenance backlog that they can't get on top of via their system as it is. But to do a true comparison, as Dale has done when he puts this together, you have to look at the districts. And Missoula, for once in the state, or rarely, was actually really late to the game in terms of special districts. And that's why you see a much smaller proportion, comparatively speaking. So I had a bunch of other notes, but I know we're getting there.
You should.
Annexation. I want to say the council looked very hard at the annexation out of the airport, and as Dale said, they haven't done a lot of annexation. There have been sort of parcels and stuff, but in terms of major areas, and the reason for that is a majority of council understands that it's more expensive to deliver services the farther you get from the urban core. And so when you start annexing land further and further out, providing fire, providing police, providing sewer and water to those areas, it gets more and more expensive. And so there's really good stuff out there. A lot of council members, including myself, follow City Lab and a lot of the papers and ideas that get explored there. And they have great data showing sort of from a return on investment standpoint how you got to be really careful, because it can be tantalizing to annex lands to acquire the property tax base, but then to service those with the necessary services over time is often a bit of a show me, to be honest. So we've tried to be very intentional. We knew when we annexed that land out by the airport, we got impact statements from the police, fire, I think parks, all the maintenance service to those areas. We looked at impact statements and did an assessment of, was this in the financial interest of the city? For that annexation, I would maintain it was a strategic, smart investment overall for all of the taxpayers in the city. But that's the kind of analysis you got to go through.
Can you dispel the rumor then about East Missoula and the plan, I mentioned that before, that we already provide services out there, and there's already sewage being brought in from out there, but they're not annexed?
They are not annexed.
So I will tell you that on my watch, I can't imagine annexing East Missoula. There's not enough tax base there to support the additional expense in services.
So how are the services currently being provided and paid for then?
They're paid by rate.
User fee.
Yeah. It's a user fee.
Well, except, I mean, so the city of Missoula doesn't provide fire protection or police protection. I mean, our service out there is really sewer.
Yeah.
So all of the other things are provided by Missoula County or our fire district or some other entity.
Yeah, are they rural fire district?
Yeah, they have the rural fire district, East Missoula Rural Fire.
Right.
Any other questions? Now that it's 10 minutes to 9.
Don't make me go.
I knew it.
If I could, I have to make a point. So I bought, the house I live in, I bought in 1993, and the taxes were under $900 annually, and the house was worth $65,000. It's currently worth about $300,000. I pay $4,000 a year in taxes, and the wages I made in 1993 have increased of my fixed income today is about 2/3 of what my fixed income is today, but the taxes have gone up that much. And that's where I was going with some kind of tax relief.
No, and I appreciate that. My wife and I, our incomes, our incomes have not kept pace with the way our home in the north side has appreciated by any stretch. Our taxes have gone up as well. We just refinanced this year. It's one of the tools that folks who've seen an increase in the appreciation of their home can explore. We did that, and that's one of the comments I often make when we're going through this is you have to look at both sides of the ledger, so to speak, in terms of the value of the home. It can be difficult because if your income on an annual basis is fixed or not changing in proportion, I'm not trying to downplay that, but in our case, we chose to refinance, maintaining the same debt equity ratio, and took some money out because of that. I wish there were more options there. There's a fantastic article that I just saw, I think it was in the Washington Post from either last weekend or maybe before, and I could maybe send it to Heather to distribute, that was breaking down growth and expenses in major categories over, I think it's the last sort of 50 years in the U.S., and it tells an amazing story, and part of it is just the way they frame it, and the biggest growth overall, and the thing that's most frustrating to me, is the growth in healthcare costs. Healthcare costs, and the way they tell the story is, the average American in 1950, and I don't get the numbers, I'm taking a little liberty with the numbers, but could make enough money to cover the sum total of these expenses in about 40 weeks. Today, to cover those expenses requires the same sort of couple to work 54 or 55 weeks a year. The obvious problem being there's only 52 weeks in the year. So growth, we have a number of issues to tackle in this country. We have real issues with property tax reform. We also have issues that dwarf that relative to things like healthcare costs.
I suggest you tax my heirs, not me. Because I was kidding.
They're going to ask for the money up front.
Well, can we have a round of applause? Okay, folks, I need to know how much longer we are willing to hang out this evening. It is 7 minutes of 9. Who here has to leave by 9? No. Okay, enough. Okay. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to hand out your certificates. They're in alphabetical order by first name, so just be ready when I have the A, when I work the back at the end. And then after that, for those who can stick around, I know I gave you a homework assignment, noodling feedback. I know not everybody's got it done, and that's okay. If you don't, email it to me. I would very much appreciate it. It is really very delightful to read what people say in terms of trying to make this program better for next year. I'm very curious to know about what kind of interest you might have in terms of taking the next step in terms of making our community better. And that's up to you. Some people just like to take a back seat, and that's perfectly okay. And then other folks, like Nick Shantz in the back of the room, Academy cadet from last year, he ran for city council.
And so there is a whole spectrum of opportunity for leadership. Our community needs every one of us to take another step forward. We cannot tackle things when it comes down to the safety of our community, the welfare of our community either, without all of us being engaged in some capacity. So with that, Amanda Milburn, you're up first. And she's left. Brian Chaddock. Congratulations. Thank you. Brady Potts. Congratulations. Brian Holdorf. Carly Kelly McDonald. Christine Larson and Dave Larson. You get to look like both of them. And next up we got Dave Bell. Got a poster? Yeah, these are legit. All right. Oh, and Eric's gone. Aaron Miller. Sullivan, you're next. Karaka Lamaster. And Jackie Wallawander. Dennis Krisky. All right. Julie Aldigari. Julie Stevenson. Where are you, Julie? That's right. Carrie Neal is gone. Catherine Downey. I was hoping you might. All right. Kim Welser. Tracy thinking. And Liz Mullen. There you are. Mary Dalton. I like all these applause. All right, Michael Albrecht. Michael Singer, up next. Nancy Minnie. Nina Kalkar. All right, and Paige Patricia Hogan.
Get our student home. I need student home.
Rachel Boone. You did it right the first time. Boone. Rebecca Pettit. Sheila Lewis. Sheila Winker. Sue Harrison. Zach Dolak. All right, folks, I know some folks got to leave, but I want to say thank you. This really pleases me. I'm easy to please, but beside that, no, I really do appreciate your commitment and coming each and every week. I know sometimes it didn't pan out, that's fine. Sometimes we get sick. But overall, the spirit of what we are as Missoulians is embraced in this room. And we know times can be really challenging. We know what happens in our community can scare the living daylights out of us sometimes. But overall, we keep doing what we keep doing. We take one step forward each and every day. We keep being the people that we are. We hold our chins up high, and we try and be role models for the next person that comes behind us. I am a person that suffers from depression from time to time, and one of the things I would like to just remind all of you, smile, treat people kindly, and pay them a compliment. To complete strangers, you will change the world just doing little things like that. So thank you all for coming tonight. It has been my great pleasure to serve you. Okay, and with that, anybody who wants to stick around for a little bit, we will talk